Glad to be here this morning. A little nervous. I'll get over it. My name is Kevin Nielsen. I'm from Whittier City School District, and I teach at Lydia Jackson Elementary School. It's my 19th year in teaching. I career transitioned. I used to do product and channel marketing, high-tech marketing. That really just wasn't my fit until I got into teaching. And I realized that when I finally started substitute teaching, before I got a full teaching credential, I realized, I think this is it. I think this is where I want to be. 19 years later, here we are. So my journey began with codes during an interview during pandemic. I was stressed, I was tired, I was on a screen in Zoom with a full interview panel, and I knew a little bit about CodeSyn, not very much, and I knew that something had to change about the way that I was teaching math. And so I thought CodeSyn might be the perfect opportunity to ramp that up a bit. It was during my interview with CodeSyn that one of the interviewers told me about how CGI got started in La Jolla. At that moment, I was sold. Whenever I learn of something new that's happening in schools, especially those in more affluent communities, which are quite the opposite of the community that I teach in, which is lower socioeconomic, I wanted the same for my students. They deserve it as well. My first trainings were something like this: partitive division, joint change unknown, separate change unknown. By the end of my second training with Joan Case, who's been an excellent educator herself for all of us, my head was spinning with all sorts of things, including new terms and math concepts that I'd never heard of before. Needless to say, my mentor, Kim Estrada, and I were a bit confused about a lot of things during those first few trainings. We were overwhelmed not only with our new learning, but how we were going to teach all this CGI math when we had to adhere to our district's program, Eureka Math. How are we going to make this all work? It was kind of confusing too, because the first year I was in CodeSyn as a mentor, the schools were all closed. We were still on lockdown for COVID, unfortunately. But during the second year, once those school sites began opening up and lab sites finally came open, I signed up for everything I could go to. And then that's when it all started to make sense, was at those lab days. I attended everything from more trainings with Joan Case, counting collections trainings with Angela True, math routines and number sense with Berkeley Everett, and of course, constant bothering and asking Alicia Jackson a million questions every time I saw her, but I loved every moment of it because she gave me so much great advice and helped me continue on my journey with understanding CGI and how to implement it. As teachers, we consistently hear about developing a love of reading in our students, but in my opinion, I think we rarely ever hear this or do this necessarily for developing a love of math with our students. With packaged programs, that's oftentimes impossible to do. Well, CGI has actually helped my students develop a love for math, I have to say. And as my mentor, Kim, and I have seen a new enthusiasm within my students, amongst my fourth graders. An enthusiasm for math that you don't get from a packaged program per se. For example, students don't have to memorize standard algorithms. They don't race to complete a mouthful page of problems, only to take an exit ticket to get a yes, an almost, or not yet, which can be discouraging, especially for those of us like me who struggle with math growing up, while hoping everyone got it, and then moving on to the next lesson the next day to keep up with that pacing guide that we all love so much. We started small, mostly incorporating a few number sense routines that I have learned, including number talks, choral counting, true or false, and a few others. And Kim and I were stunned after our first choral counting lesson that we did together with my class. I had a number of students who actually wanted to stay at the carpet and not return to their seats and talk about the math that we had just completed. That's something I've never experienced before in all my years of teaching. And in a few cases, it was some of the students I would least suspect would want to do that. My students love these math routines that I've been able to learn because of CodeSyn through CGI. I think their favorite one at this point is which one doesn't belong, because most of the students participate, unlike math lessons in the past. Of course, last Thursday, things got a little out of control during the subitizing routine, but we got through it. Everyone had fun, and they were all engaged, and isn't that what we want them to be, is engaged, because that's when they're learning. Routines I've learned have been so effective. Like I said, it causes my quiet students to participate, and they want to be part of it too. And it's overwhelming with the number of students who are excited to share what they've learned, now what they know and what they understand about math. The story problems that we've learned with Joan Case have been challenging for students, as they should be. This is their first year in CGI math, and they're fourth graders. And they've been conditioned to focus on the standard algorithm. I think we all can relate, most of us anyway, when we're growing up. The standard algorithm, you solve the problem and you move on. While I let them do, obviously, use the standard algorithm at times, they're asked, show me another way to do it. How else can you do that? That's fantastic. You multiplied it and divided and you added. How else can you do that? Give me another way. And so I pushed them up. The rigor increases. Last Thursday, I gave the students a measurement problem where they were given different heights of flagpoles and were told to convert those heights to inches. In the beginning of the lesson, I asked them how many inches are in a foot. You would think with fourth grade, everyone would know that 12 inches make a foot, but I was surprised that less than half of them actually knew. The next day, I asked students who knew how many inches are in a foot, and every hand went up in the class. Rather than memorizing, they were actually applying what they were learning. Not only were they applying, they were inventing algorithms to solve those story problems. Memorization has not been part of their learning this year. I've been telling my students to think like a mathematician, think like a scientist, an engineer, even an architect, and invent an algorithm to help them solve their story problems in all sorts of instances that I give them. Just last week, during math, I overheard some of my students referring to themselves as mathematicians. How often do you hear that? CGI Math works amazingly well with our school-wide AVID initiative and AVID strategies, where students share and discuss how they solve their story problems while encouraging other students who may be struggling themselves. It's funny when you have students cheer when you announce they're going to be working on math using an AVID strategy like World Cafe or a gallery walk, for that fact. Or you observe your students having fun and learning while engaged in a counting collections activity. Because of Coates, I've been able to learn CGI, and it's changed how I perceive math and how I teach math. More importantly, it's changed how my students feel about math. There's a significant importance of them perceiving themselves as mathematicians, as we're all aware of. Math lessons no longer leave them discouraged because I got most of the problems wrong on the math book page today, or I got another almost or not yet on an exit ticket. I can relate. CGI encourages students to persevere in mathematics. This is evident when I praise students who are insecure in math and guide them through questioning their work, not telling them, this is how you do it. There's no discouragement. There is no, your answer is wrong in my classroom. This happened last week with the student I have who is significantly below grade level, very withdrawn, and comes from a very difficult home environment. While numerous others were challenged with the story problem, she almost had it. After discussing her work and following up with some guiding questions for her, she was one of the first ones to actually accurately solve the question, the problem, the story problem. Immediately, I grabbed her paper, under the document camera it went, so I could show her solution to everyone else, the algorithm that she had created. This was an opportunity for her to feel good about herself, and she was beaming from ear to ear. While my math instruction still needs a lot more work, a lot more practice, I have nothing but thanks to the Coatsen Foundation for allowing me to learn more about CGI, to bring this back to my students for their benefit from my learning. In addition, there's now an increased awareness and interest in CGI happening amongst many of our members of our school staff. The next morning, after being notified they'd been selected to be Coatsen Fellows beginning next year, 3 teachers excitedly came running to me the next morning to tell me, all of whom were very enthusiastic about their upcoming adventure with Coaching, and their CGI fellows, and can't wait to begin their journey. Thank you, Coaching.